All right, so like I said, one of the things that had a little bit of trouble with, I think, was identifying outliers. So I want to make sure you understand that before you take your test. Remember, in order to do this, you're going to have to know the IQR, which means I probably want to go ahead and find the whole 5-number summary. So the 5-number summary should have been those 5 numbers there, where we went all the way from 20 to 86. But we also need these values in between. I also asked you for the range on this one. So the overall range, remember, is the maximum minus the minimum. So 86 minus 20, you should have found out the range of 66 on this one. The IQR, remember, is going to be Q3 minus Q1. So Q3 was 50, Q1 was 27, so your IQR should have been 23. All right, now for outliers. We're going to use that IQR. We're going to multiply it by 1.5. But once we do that, remember, we're not done. That's just going to be a value that's going to help us. So first of all, when we do multiply that, 23 times 1.5 is 32.5. But the reason we want that number is it's going to give me my limits. It's going to tell me the lower limit and the upper limit. When I do the lower limit, which value do I start with? Q1, good. So I'm going to go to Q1, which was 27, and I'm going to subtract that 34.5 that I just found. In this case, I'm going to end up with a negative 7.5, which means I'm going to be in good shape on the low end if I didn't have any negative numbers. And generally, I won't say 100% of the time, but generally you don't have outliers on the low end. Sometimes you do, but generally there's going to be one on the upper end if there is one. When I do find the upper end, though, where do I start? Q3 this time. So I'm going to start at 50, but now we're going to add it on. So 84.5 is the upper limit, which means we did have some outliers here. We actually had 2 for this data because 85 and 86 both were past that limit. So the outliers we have are those 2 values. So again, when you have a problem like this, show me this value, show me your lower and your upper limits, and then make your decision after that. Now, I didn't ask you to make a box plot for this, but let's say I did ask you to make a box plot for this one. A few things to keep in mind. One thing would be you want to make sure that you set up your number line with an even interval. And this one was fairly spread out because you went from 20 to 86. So you'd have to decide what you'd want to go by. That's a range of 66. I don't know, you may even want to go by 20s or by 10s on this. Then we make the box based on Q1 and Q3. So Q1 was 27 and Q3 was 50. And we marked the median inside that box, so that was 34. And then we make our whiskers. Now, this one's a little bit different, though. On the low end, it's okay because our minimum is 20, so I just draw it out to 20. We didn't have any outliers. But if I have outliers, remember we marked those separately. So 85 and 86 were both outliers. So I'm going to mark both of those with an asterisk. Where would I draw the whisker to on this one? 59. Yeah, the next highest one in line there. So 59 was the next highest one. So I draw it out to there. Okay, so other than a title, that would be our box plot for that data. If we don't have any outliers, it's no big deal. You just draw it out to the biggest value or the smallest value. All right, so you'll have to do an example similar to that when you do your test. And the sheet you're doing here, you'll be able to use that on your test as well. The other type problems that it seems like I'm getting questions on are the percentile and the z-score type problems. So I'm going to go through one of those as well. Everybody good on this from you? Okay. So here's a problem where they gave us a dot plot. They said the dot plot was going to be related to the sale prices of different houses in Ames, Iowa. And they marked that one price with the red dot. Well, they wanted to know, first of all, what's the percentile of that house that was indicated. So we're looking for the percentile based on that value right there. So again, with the percentiles, we're not going to count the value we're looking at. We're looking at all the ones below that. So I'm going to go through and see how many I have below that. So I've got 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 25, 26 values that are less than that. So I would say, or I would find the percentile by taking 26 out of the total 40 houses that we looked at. And when I do that, I get 0.65. We're talking about the 65th percentile. I think the biggest mistake I've been seeing is people counting that value. Always count the stuff below that value. So I think we're getting better at that. The z-scores, for the z-scores, you should have your formula written down somewhere, but remember it's the value minus the mean divided by the standard deviation. Well, they want us to find the z-score for the house that was sold for $234,000. They already told us up here what the mean was, and they already told us what the standard deviation was. So I'm going to plug in all those values and see what the z-score is. So to find the z-score, we're going to plug in, first of all, the value they gave us. We're going to take away from that the mean, which they gave us up top. And we're going to divide all that by the standard deviation. We also do this as well. Now, some of you are doing a good job setting it up, but I think you're making a mistake when you punch it in the calculator. When you punch this in the calculator, do the subtraction up top. But if you're doing it on the graphing calculator, I do the subtraction, hit enter before you do the division. So on this one, if I put it in and subtract, I get 30,612 on top. Now I divide it by bottom. And so if I round it off, I get 0.35. Generally, our z-scores aren't going to be really big numbers. So if you ended up with a big number, you may have punched it in incorrectly. The problem is what some of you I think were doing was you put this minus that divided by that all into one line. And the calculator is not going to do the subtraction first. It's going to do the division first. You just have to be careful. Now, as far as what that means, remember z-score is really how many standard deviations we either are above or below the mean. So in this case, we'd be 0.35 standard deviations above the mean. If it's negative, that just means we are below the mean. Below that. All right, like I said, those are kind of the main ones I've been seeing with